Silly season has begun in the NHL with the goaltenders kicking off the start of the summer. Two big names came off the trade bait board today, but who is still remaining in net for the Maple Leafs? We'll discuss that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, Dave, silly season has officially begun. We had not one, but two big-time trades made in the NHL today, and another kind of trade that flew under the radar. Ty Dellandrea did get dealt from the Stars to the Sharks for a fourth-round pick. Let's give that trade the little respect that it deserves. But we did have two trades, one a massive blockbuster deal, and it's Jacob Markstrom going from the Calgary Flames to the New Jersey Devils. We also saw Darcy, Kuemper, and Pierre-Luc Dubois swap spots. So PLD going to Washington. The Kings land themselves a goalie and Darcy Kuemper. A fun day, fun little couple of hours in the hockey world with a couple of big time trades. Let's start with Markstrom, because that's obviously the big deal. And it was reported that the Maple Leafs were in on him. Did kick tires. They did try to make a deal, and apparently Markstrom was open to going to Toronto if the Leafs came up with the best offer. Turns out that the Flames decided to go with the Devils' offer of a 2025 top 10 protected first round pick and defensive prospect Kevin Ball. Big dude, like 6'6", 200, big boy. Kevin Ball is. So he's a big guy. What'd you make of the deal? And, what do you think this means for the New Jersey Devils? Oh, should also note that the Devils also got 31.5% retained. So the cap hit on Markstrom, 4.125. Very, very digestible contract for the next 2 seasons for Markstrom.
Yeah, I mean that's a sizable deal for the Devils in terms of getting a goalie of that significance. And yeah, they're paying a first round pick, but they also made sure that the pick was top 10 protected. They didn't give up a top prospect. I think what this was a realization is the Flames didn't really have many avenues to explore because Markstrom had a lot to say in where he went with his no trade protection. So I think it just seemed like a matter of time before we heard Markstrom to the Devils. Like that was always it was kind of like that. I think during the season with the trade that apparently almost happened during the season.
At the deadline, there was they got close, and apparently it never came to fruition for whatever reason. And then there was always kind of a thought in the back of everyone's mind, like, this will get revisited and probably will cross the finish line in the summer. And here we are now, as we record, and June 19th, this deal finally gets completed, and the Devils have themselves a goaltender. And when you think about it, that was the real missing piece of that team last year, right? Like outside of health, which was an issue for them and kind of has been for the last couple of seasons, when healthy, they're a juggernaut of a team. Now you add a number one goaltender, something that really Sheldon Keefe has never had. I think that this truly puts the Devils into contender status, not just a playoff team, but I truthfully believe that a goalie of Markstrom's caliber, assuming that they can get healthy, guys like Dougie Hamilton return and can play at his caliber. Jack Hughes continues to take steps. Nico Hischier continues to be Bergeron light. Timo Meier, another year in the team, can come up with some big goals. Assuming all of that works out, you add Markstrom to the fold. I really do believe that this New Jersey Devils team is almost the team to beat in the East at this point, and they'll be one of the top contenders for sure going into next season.
Well, especially in the Metropolitan Division where, Yeah, the Rangers seem to be the team to beat in that division. I like what's going to happen with the Carolina Hurricanes with where they're going, right? Tulski taking over for Waddell. Other teams in the Metro really haven't been up to the task, right? You look at Washington, like they made the playoffs, but many kind of viewed them as a flawed playoff team.
Oh,
Yeah,
they got a maybe number 2 center now. We'll get to that in a sec.
yeah. Then you got the Columbus Blue Jackets, who appear to be more lost than ever as an organization, in my opinion, just based on how they've operated the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh Penguins went all in on a aging roster with another expensive aging player, Erik Karlsson, that didn't really help a power play that was really abysmal.
Yep.
Pretty much cost their season. So, if you're the Devils, you looked at last season as a missed opportunity in that division to really not only make the playoffs, but just pick up on the momentum that they got from a few years ago. That's a team I think a lot of people have really liked. And look, they made some pretty decent moves, right? Getting Sheldon Keefe in there. Now they got Markstrom. I don't know what exactly their cap situation is like, but there's a lot to like there, right? Jack Hughes, can he kind of get back on track? Nico Heischer's proven to be a guy that's in that like Barkov, Bergeron, two-way guy. Really has taken strides the last couple of years to really cement his game. So yeah, it's a great trade for New Jersey. And like for the Flames, it's like, Craig Conroy was trying his best, obviously, to throw cold water on this. He was asked about this a few days ago, and it just seemed like a lot of people for some people I talked to in Calgary didn't exactly seem overly thrilled about the deal because, I guess maybe they were expecting more because, at one point the idea of the Devils' first round pick for this year was being thrown in there, which would seem a little ludicrous based on,
10th overall is where it sits.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the fact that they didn't get like a top prospect either. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, they got a decent prospect. They definitely got an NHL blue liner, a guy with size, which is highly coveted in today's hockey world. But I think a lot of people expected maybe like an Alexander Holtz to be included in the deal, maybe a Dawson Mercer to be included in the deal. One of those two players to kind of be to center it. But no, they're able to get it done with Kevin Ball and a 2022, and they were able to get Calgary to retain 31.5% of it. And I'm looking at their cap right now; it's in a good spot, Dave. It is in a really, really good spot. As of now, they have $16 million in cap space, projected cap space, and the only person of significance that they really have to re-sign. They've got Dawson Mercer as an RFA. Okay, so you'll figure something out with Dawson Mercer. Probably not going to cost you too much. I would think in the threes, probably. I would think a bridge deal type of deep thing with Dawson Mercer. Thomas Noshik, if you want, you could potentially bring him back, but that's not going to cost you a whole lot. Maybe a $2 million, I guess, if you really wanted to. Outside of that, they don't really have anyone who is needing of a contract. So they've got pretty much, I would say, over 10 million for sure, if not 12, 13 million to spend in free agency to bring in, another blue liner or to possibly bring in, another scoring forward or a bottom six forward, add some depth. They've got money. They can continue to improve on this team throughout the offseason and give Sheldon Keefe as deep of a team as he can have. And look, depth is going to be the name of the game, right? You look at the teams that are at the top in the East, the Carolina Hurricanes, they're a deep team. The New York Rangers, very deep team. And then you obviously look at right there in their division or in the Cup Final right now, the Florida Panthers, very deep team. So that'll, I assume be what they're going to be looking to do for the rest of the offseason. They've got plenty of cap space to do it as well. So love the deal from a Devils perspective, got themselves the bona fide number one goaltender that they solely needed and didn't give up a whole lot of it. I expect big things out of the New Jersey Devils. As for the LA Kings, they also acquired a number one goaltender. Did they win that deal? Let's talk about it on the other side. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views to receipts, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code with Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you as we are each and every weekday here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Monday through Friday, you get brand new episodes coming straight to you, whether it's on your favorite audio app, podcasting app, or right here on YouTube. And we would ask that if you enjoy listening to the content that we provide each day and will continue to provide throughout the off season, go ahead, toss us a like on the video, give us a subscribe, a thumbs up, and let us know down below because we're going to answer this question shortly. Now that Markstrom is off the board, now that Kuemper is off the board, who should the Maple Leafs go after? We'll get into that conversation in just a little bit. But let's break down this Darcy Kuemper trade, Dave. Kuemper to the Los Angeles Kings in exchange for Pierre-Luc Dubois, who now joins Alex Ovechkin in Washington. It's a straight 1-for-1 swap, no salary retained, no picks involved, just an old school hockey deal of two problem contracts. Who came out on top though, Dave?
I've been shaking my head when I saw this deal. I just like, what? Hey, what?
Like the bunny, the meme of the bunny, just
like
or the John C. Reilly.
Yeah, like I was trying very hard to figure out what exactly the Washington Capitals were trying to do in all this. Like,
yeah,
I know that Darcy Kuemper hasn't exactly flourished in since signing in Washington. I get that, but like you took on the contract of a player who was on the fourth line with the LA Kings and is just starting that contract. You got that for 7 more years. And he's got a no move clause that kicks in July 1.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, the LA Kings come out as winners just because they get out of that Pierre-Luc Dubois contract. The fit wasn't there. Yeah, I understand that Darcy Kuemper, you're taking a risk on that, but I'd rather take the risk on a Darcy Kuemper for 3 more years than a Pierre-Luc Dubois for 7 more years.
And you're saving over $3 million in valuable cap space by also making this trade.
Exactly.
Like, I agree. I think the Kings definitely, in my opinion, won this deal for sure. Let me break down the cap situation for both sides. So Kuemper's making $5.2 million for the next 3 seasons. Pierre-Luc Dubois, as you noted, Dave, still 7 years left on his deal, making $8.5 million AAV. I will say that I'll play devil's advocate for a second here. I will say this. Between the two players, Pierre-Luc Dubois has the higher upside, right?
Yes.
Like, yes, Kuemper's won a Stanley Cup before. You know, he's got a cup pedigree. You know, he could win with him, and that's what the Kings are hoping for. He can channel, you know, that inner Colorado Avalanche Kuemper that was inside of him, and potentially lead them to a cup and give them the goaltending that they solely need to get over the hump. But what the Capitals, I assume, is hoping is Pierre-Luc Dubois can re-find himself, because it wasn't that long ago that Pierre-Luc Dubois was, you know, a highly coveted asset on the market. 1 year ago, the LA Kings paid a king's ransom to bring this guy into their team. They gave up a first-round pick, Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, and Rasmus Kupari to go out and get it. Was it first or second round pick? Either way, first or second, that's a big ticket to pay to bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then have to sign him additionally to a long-term $8.5 million contract. So that was 1 year ago.
It
That's
was
what
a
his
second round
value.
pick, by the way. It was
A
a
second
second.
round pick. Okay, second round pick. So a little less, but I mean, Velarde was a first round pick for them. Kupari was a first round pick back in the day. Iafallo's like a 20-25 goal scorer. And who else was in that deal? There's one other player that I can't remember right now, but it was in the pick. So solid return, right? They had to give up a lot to get him. And the reason why they gave up a lot is because they look at him and they say, no more than like 3 years ago, this guy was looked at as a top tier second line center. Maybe not probably, but quite a first line center. But us here in Toronto know firsthand the type of player that Pierre-Luc Dubois can be. Think back to the bubble series against Austin Matthews and how he made life hell for Matthews. And
Mhm.
honestly, shut down that top line. He did a terrific job of doing that. So I'm assuming Washington is like, look, the guy's still young. He's still only, 26, 27 years old. There's still a player in here. If we can somehow reignite that flame, we have a second line center for years at a decent rate at $8.5 million. Power forward, someone who maybe can play with Ovechkin. Um, I think they're just banking on the upside that they can get Pierre-Luc Dubois to return to what he was or what they thought he was going to be. Get back to being that 30 goal scoring power forward centerman. That's what they're hoping they can get out of Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's definitely a lot of upside if you can get and this is what kind of has been Washington's MO the last kind of few years, right? When they made the Mantha trade with Detroit, when they made the trade with the Leafs to get Sandy. They're betting on guys that teams maybe don't value as much anymore, and seeing if they can kind of strike gold a little bit with some of those deals. I like this is a team that can't do a rebuild because you got Ovechkin, because you got a
Right.
John Carlson. So what do? They're kind of like the Pittsburgh Penguins, right? Find a way to get a little younger, but also find a way to still be competitive. And that's a tough position to be in. It's not an easy that's not an easy position for a lot of teams to be in and trying to still compete. But at the same time, they're those the teams that are willing to make life a little more interesting for a lot of us who are waiting for big news to drop. So I'll give LA, I'll give Washington credit. At least it like you saw the Markstrom trade and you go, oh, it's a big one. And you see this one is like, who that's even bigger. So at least I'll give credit on that they're willing to do those sort of things to kind of show their, especially the fan base. We're not just gonna pack it in, right? We're gonna try our best to compete.
And I'll say this, think back to just the last 2 years. So last year was obviously a tough season, just never got it going in LA. 16 goals, 40 points, not a good season for him. But the season prior, his last 2 years in Winnipeg, 27 goals, 63 points, 28 goals and 60 points. But the year before, 27 goals, 63 points in just 73 games. That's nearly a 30 goal pace, 65 point pace. I'd be happy if I get that out of Pierre-Luc Dubois going forward. I think you are happy with that, considering he can also, when he feels like it, give you some solid defensive play as a two-way wing or two-way centerman down the middle. Big body, obviously at 6'3", 220 pounds, and he's just turning 26 literally next week. So still very, very young. There's still some upside there. I like that they're making the bet. And let's not forget also who the number one goalie in Washington is. It wasn't Darcy Kuemper.
No.
Keumper was sitting the pine at the end of the season and into the playoffs. It's Charlie Lindgren's net in Washington. So you took your backup goaltender, your 1B at best, and turned him into second, third line center. Essentially is what you did. Now you're paying for it, obviously, but I do think that I still believe that the Kings won this deal, but I don't hate it from a Washington perspective as much as most. But that's only because I see more upside. 2 years from now, though, I could totally change my opinion if Pierre-Luc Dubois has another year that he did this season. If he continues forward and that's the PLD that Washington's going to get, then it's an awful trade. But I'll reserve judgment and see what type of PLD we get the next couple of years in Washington before completely eviscerating them on this deal. So with that, that's two goaltenders that are off the market, and we are expecting a bit of a goalie carousel this summer. Why don't we come back and talk about maybe, with these two gone, who else could the Maple Leafs target this offseason now? So we'll take a look at some of the goaltenders from free agency, who's still out there in the trade market. And we know 2 preseason dates for the Toronto Maple Leafs next season. So we will tell you those dates on the other side. It's Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Ultimate Hockey GM. Hey, Locked On Leaf fans, I want to take a moment to bring up one of our partners, the mobile game Ultimate Hockey GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NHL general manager and managing your hockey franchise? Do you think you could run the Maple Leafs better than Brad Treliving or better than Kyle Dubas did? Well, your dream can come true, and this game is most definitely for you. Manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through the seasons and lead it to glory, hire the right coaches and staff, trade players or picks, navigate through free agency and the draft, all in a challenging and realistic game world. As a Leaf fan, you know there is no offseason. GMs are constantly making moves at every point of the year to improve their team's chances, and that's why I think you are going to love this game. Ultimate Hockey GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want, when you want. By the way, Locked On Network listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On NHL in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit hockeygm.app. That's hockeygm.app, or look it up in the App Store. Ultimate Hockey GM. Start your dynasty today. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. It was a busy day around the NHL, obviously, with Jacob Markstrom going to the Devils, Darcy Kuemper going to the Kings, Ty Dellandrea going to the Sharks, and also Barclay Goodrow, who we slightly discussed on yesterday's podcast, did get claimed off of waivers. He's going back to San Jose. So the Sharks taking on Barclay Goodrow's full freight of, was it $3.6 million, I believe, for the next 3 years. Kind of surprised that if they knew that Goodrow was going to be hitting the wire and maybe there was, interest in him, could they not have called the Rangers and been like, hey, we'll take on this player for, give us a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick. We'll take the full freight. I would imagine that I don't know, the Rangers might have gone for it as opposed to taking the gamble on nobody claiming them in, via waivers.
Like if you're the Rangers, you're like, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just saved us from not only having to deal with that cap hit, but you're also saving us from having to use assets. Because how many times we heard teams have to give up something to get rid of the salary, and then the Rangers like, maybe someone will want it, right?
The name Patrick Marleau comes to mind, but we'll skip past that.
Thank you for that one, Mike.
Yeah. Just for those who forgot,
Oh, we don't forget. Also, that wasn't the only deal the Sharks made today. Like Ty Dellandrea, that was kind of
you missed it, pal.
Sorry. But like those two deals, I mean, you're bringing those two together. Like, what are the Sharks trying to do?
Well, I mean, I think they're just trying to insulate. No, they're trying to just insulate what's going to be a young team with some good veterans. That's all they're doing.
I don't think we talked about it, but Mike Greer kind of having a bit of a slip up when they were asking about the draft.
He said he was going to talk with Macklin's family, basically already telling the world that he's taking Macklin Celebrini at number 1 overall. Not that we didn't know that was happening, but it's kind of funny.
It's kind of a faux pas. You never reveal the player, even if it's Connor Bedard or Connor McDavid.
He even like stopped himself too. He's like, "Did I say Macklin? Yeah, I did, didn't I? All right. Well, cat's out of the bag."
Yeah.
It's like he just owned it, which I kind of respected, to be honest with you. But yeah, a busy day in the NHL, one of the off days between the Cup final, and I'm glad to see that teams are like, you know what, screw this. The league wanted to make this season go way too long. We're not waiting. We're going to start making some moves and start making some changes to our teams and our rosters to get ready for next year. The Maple Leafs nowhere to be seen when it comes to that. Nah, I shouldn't say that. They're called around. They're making their rounds, but have yet to strike when it comes to making a trade. That being said, it did come out. Darren Dreger said that they were in on Jacob Markstrom. Markstrom was willing to waive to come to Toronto, but obviously lost out to the New Jersey Devils in that deal. But who else is available at this point? Like, we've now seen a couple of goaltenders kind of come off the board here in Markstrom, in Darcy Kuemper. Who else is available for the Maple Leafs if they do want to bolster, their crease? So we know Joe Wall is there, and whether he's going to be the 1A or the 1B, I guess that'll depend on who they get moving forward. But let's start with the possible trade options. What trade options are still available for the Maple Leafs right now, Dave?
Well, if you go into the Discord, there's one particular member who keeps throwing up the same gif of UC Saros. So UC Saros is available, but we've also heard, I think Elliot Friedman mentioned that the Predators are also trying to get him locked down to a contract, which also doesn't surprise me potentially because, if you feel good with Saros and you can extend him, whether or not they extend him and potentially see how Askarov goes, and maybe one day they have to make the choice between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's where they want to go. I think they kind of want Askarov to be the guy.
Yeah,
before they have to pay up for Saros.
So Nashville typically just don't believe in like no trade clauses, no movement clauses. Like they typically don't believe in that, and they just don't. That changed a couple of years ago. And I wonder if like the thought process of Saros is now, well, if you want me to stick around, like I want trade protection. And they don't want to be in a situation where Askarov does become the guy and then Saros is kind of just there, but he has all the say. So they maybe want to get ahead of it and trade him now while there is no protection on his deal. I'd imagine that's kind of the situation. And if they can somehow convince him to sign without any protection, different story. And then I think they'd be smart to kind of wait and see if Askarov does actually turn into the number one goalie that we expect him to be. But if not, then yeah, I think entertaining trade offers would probably be a smart thing. And the Leafs would be very smart to be in on it because Saros is a great goalie. I know we kind of sit on opposite sides of the fence on Saros being like the number one trade target for Toronto. But now that Markstrom's gone, are you at least now more open to Saros being the guy, or is there another trade target that you kind of like?
I think there's other trade targets I like only because we're hearing Saros in the conversation of like getting a high end deal of the Bobrovsky-esque level. Like he wants
sheets.
I've heard that because they're waiting for Shesterkin to make that one. And then that gives Saros, because again, everyone's talking about Saros as like that top tier goalie. Well, guess what? He can go to National, say, you pay me, or I'm going to go to the market, and
but I see him more in the Markstrom top tier realm than I do in the Shesterkin. Like I wouldn't be looking at that and saying, yeah,
I wouldn't either.
Comparable. But
I've heard it, and that's my concern. There is what, because you trade for Saros. Obviously, you want to get that done with a contract, right? You're not trading him for a 1-year rental. Like I just can't see the Leafs doing that.
No,
right? I was kind of hoping that with the Connor Hellebuck deal, that would kind of also kind of curtail Saros looking to get top tier money as well. So maybe that's something that kind of helps the case. But I think there's other options out there. Like I like a Philip Gustafson a little bit more, just because he's like that's a clear 1A 1B with Wool.
Yes, it's also a big roll of the dice. Like, we're talking about a guy who's been incredibly inconsistent his entire career. Like, he's almost like where Bobrovsky was at for a while, where it was one great year, one bad year, one good year, one bad year. Like, he's kind of just flip-flopped over the last few seasons here, which could suggest he's due for a good year coming up. But if I had to pick between the two, I definitely would rather the established player in Saros. I like the contract of Gustafsson. I think he's got 2 more years left at like 3.25, which is very, I like that. You pair him with Wolves making like 800 grand or something, like 850. Great contract. Now you're looking, you're like, all right, we got like our goaltending short up for $4 million. That'd be solid. I do think that would be a good tandem. But if all things were equal, I'd certainly rather Saros. Linus Ullmark is an interesting one too, though. Like, Boston's going to want to be players in free agency, and I think if they can get out of that money, then that would be another option as well. I'm just not sure that the Bruins would want to deal him within the division. But at this point, like, 2 of the bigger suitors for goaltenders, now that LA and New Jersey have their attendees, is the Leafs and the Sens, the 2 teams in their division. So they may have to just kind of swallow it and trade him within the division and hope that it doesn't come back to bite them.
Well, that's the issue there, right? And like Ottawa is also keen on adding a goalie.
Yeah.
Like there will be teams looking for a goalie. It's just the teams you like they clearly last year wanted to trade him as far away from them as possible when they were looking at LA as a potential suitor, right? So to me, it's like, is Boston going to be like Calgary in a way where it's like we're not going, even though we want to move this guy, we're not going to help a team out by doing it, right? Even though it helps them out because that's $5 million on your cap that could prevent you from adding a defenseman, from adding a centerman. Like, do you really want to do that to yourself, Boston? Do you really?
Well, that's the thing. Like, would you rather 36 games of Volmark, or would you rather 82 games of Elias Lindholm?
Yeah.
Like, that's what you can turn Olmark's money into. Not that will only get $5 million, but like, you take that money and now it's available to put towards the whatever $7-8 million contract he signs. So, the Leafs could take him off their hands. That would be a solid addition. Like, I think those 3 are probably the top dogs out there now. Then there's a couple of free agent options that are more so 1Bs, like Larry Brossoit, we've talked about a lot, and there's been reports that there's interest in Brossoit, and both parties may have some interest in getting a deal done come July 1. And then Darren Dreger unpromptedly brought up Anthony Stolarz today on a report he did with Gino Reda on That's Hockey. So I wonder if Stolarz is also a guy who's going to be on the radar. Someone who has played well over the last couple of years as Bobrovsky's backup, but hasn't quite had a chance to be a starter. A little bit older, but maybe that could be another play. I don't know. I personally would prefer the trade route and pick up one of those other 3 goalies, but it sounds like maybe Brossoit and Stolarz could be the more likely options, the cheaper options for the Maple Leafs. We'll see what happens this summer, but I think those 5 goaltenders, I'd be surprised if one of them doesn't end up in Toronto next year.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds more likely the Leafs are going to add a goalie, and we also have to consider, they have cap space, but they also want to do other things. So they're also, the reason why you're hearing a Stolarz, a Brossoit, even a Cam Talbot, like, it's because you're looking at goaltenders that are not going to break the bank in terms of a deal. And that's, as much as we're looking at these Stanley Cup Finals, obviously you got the one goaltender making $10 million. Stuart Skinner's not getting that, but it's also showing the premium of having a goaltender, right? And so I think the Leafs are kind of in that position where they would love to go out and get a big name. But again, it brings up to that idea of, do they even have the cap flexibility to do it? Because they got the whole Mitch Marner situation. They want to upgrade the blue line. Only so much money to work with. So that's just kind of the position they find themselves in.
And apparently they want to bring back Domi, and they want to bring back Bertuzzi, and they want to bring
I
back.
also heard our boy Mecklenburger talk about Jake DeBrusk, Dakota Joshua.
No, Jake DeBrusk. I'll vomit if the Leafs sign Jake DeBrusk. No chance.
Hey.
Go to Joshua. I like.
Yes.
I don't like it as much at $4 million, which is what like the number apparently his camp's going to be asking for, like that Mason Marchment deal that he signed. But I do like Dakota Joshua in the $3 million range, but we'll see what ends up happening there. Maybe we can get into it tomorrow. Some of the forwards that might be available. We had a chance to chat D-men. We've now talked about the goaltenders. Maybe tomorrow we get to some of the forwards and do a little swipe left, swipe right free agent edition on the boys up front. So that could be something to look forward to on tomorrow's show. But really quickly, before we leave, a couple dates were announced for 2 of the Maple Leafs preseason games. Thanks to the Montreal Canadiens, not even the Maple Leafs, but the Canadiens announced their full preseason schedule. So obviously we now know that 2 of them will be played against Toronto, one of which will be played right here in Toronto. They're hosting the Canadiens on September 26th, and then the Leafs will be in Montreal on September 28th. So we know at least 2 of the preseason game dates, one of which is a home game on the 26th. And you can use the promo code Locked On at game time to try and get $20 off tickets for that game if you choose. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You could subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms, including up on YouTube, and receive daily Maple Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.